Good morning. So I've really been reflecting on how it's the end of an entire decade. Like when I look back at the beginning of 2000, then 2010, 2019, almost 2020. Like if I think about my life in increments like that, about how much goes on, how much happens, how much changes, and the things that go on, it's really humbling to see how far you've come. Sometimes we get stuck with these narratives we tell ourselves that we aren't enough, or we haven't done enough, or we should be doing more, or we should be here at this point by this time. But if you really look back at your life, even in the last year, you'll realize how much you've actually done. Hi, Cindy. You'll realize how much you've changed and how much you've implemented in your life. So last year I found at the end of 2018, going on 2019, I almost felt like all this pressure of like the things I want to do, the things I want to change, the things I want to implement, what I want to see in my life that's different than before. Whereas this year, I really want to go into 2020 thinking about all that I have done and more like reflecting on that to then find out what my core values are, to really feel into those values, to let me make choices from a different space, and to see what then comes of life. And there's this fine balance of trying to control everything and then surrendering to the universe. So it's like this dance, doing both, like putting your intentions out there, putting your worth out there, making those choices, but then also surrendering so you aren't just trying to control the entire outcome. So I created the 31-day program that I just recently launched because I wanted you to also feel differently about the end of this year. A lot of times we're like, oh, let's just get through the next few days, the next 2 months, and then I'll be different in January. But if you can build up the momentum of what is in your heart and what is in your soul, what's deep within that hasn't been expressed yet into form, if you start that now, the momentum is going to be so different going into 2020. So this program reflects on the last decade of your life, going into a new decade, but also this past year. So we talk a lot about the values. We talk about the stages of grief. So I read a lot about the 5 stages from one perspective, from some research I was doing and some internal work I've been doing. And I've actually added 2 steps myself on there. So grief kind of shows itself in the stages of denial, of bargaining, of anger, sadness, trying to get to acceptance, and then from there surrendering, and then going back to purpose. So those are the 2 that I've added on. And in the program you get an email every day, and each day it slowly starts to build up on the day before, but then it also goes from finding your core values, getting really solid, to now that you feel even more stronger in yourself, let's dive into the grief. Let's go into the anger. Let's go into sadness. Let's go into resentment. Let's go into all those emotions that people have taught you are bad. I still am processing the way I feel about anger. I was always told, basically, don't be mad, don't get angry, those are bad. Or if someone was angry, I'd almost curl up inside like a puppy that had just been kicked to the curb. It's a bit dramatic, but that's kind of how it feels. Your inside just want to crumble and you don't know how to respond to the anger. I then would get angry, or I would be like, oh, you're angry, that must mean you don't love me. Or you're angry, so I'm going to do this. And instead of just letting anger be anger and accepting that that's just an emotional form of energy as well that's being shown. So once you can start to dive into belief systems and into what's really true, you can then start changing the outcomes for how you're going to process grief forever, how you're going to process anger and sadness forever, how you're going to find surrendering forever. And it's just taking those little steps forward. And even if you take a few steps back, you have the tools to keep going forward. I've almost like rewired my entire business lately to be more about the self, because that is what we're talking about, is the self that is pure, the self that is just purely you. So this program takes you through the values, processing grief, hard emotions, forgiveness, cleaning up your outer environment, your mind, your food, your liquids, and then it really walks you into, now how are you going to take all these things that you now know about yourself, and how are you going to be so sturdy and firm in your beliefs and of who you are going forward into the year to come. Because once you know exactly who you are, no one can rock you off that pedestal that you've put yourself on. And I'm not talking about like an ego pedestal where you think you're better than everyone else. I just mean like you're standing with your back straight, your heart's forward, you have clear direction, you're focused, you know exactly who you are. I struggle still with if someone I feel like is picking on me or is trying to make me feel small or less than, or trying to make me feel wrong when I haven't done anything wrong, but really they're just trying to make themselves feel better about the situation by making themselves a victim, which goes into narcissism and so many other things. But knowing that that's how I feel when people do that, now I'm like, oh, that's me feeling that way. So now I could try and respond differently, or I could just not respond at all. Whereas before, I'd want to protect myself, I'd be defending, I'd be getting angry at them, I'd be starting an argument with them, and the whole thing would just continue on for hours, and really could have just been like a minute. So going through this 31-day program, you're really just going to start to see like, this is where I'm at, this is who I am, and if someone ever says anything about me or against me, I'm going to be so firm in it, because I'll be like, yeah, I already know that about myself, or yeah, actually, that's not true, because this is actually who I am. So really going back to the self that knows all, the self that's pure intent, that's beautiful, that's trustworthy. You can really trust that voice. I also talk about in the program how outside systems have made us believe that we can't even rely on ourselves. And that is heartbreaking to me, because I was that person for so long. I talk about this in the 31-day program, a little bit more about some of my personal stories. But one of them is I was really sick from the moment I was born, even as a child into my youth. And it was just like, well, I guess that's just how I'll live my life. Because I kept going to every doctor, kept doing everything they told me to do. Don't do this, take this, try this. Like, to the point that I was having a hard time just living daily life. And I remember just being like, well, I'm doing everything they say, so I guess this is it. I guess this is just what my life looks like. I'll be sick all the time. I'll be seeing multiple specialists for the rest of my life. And that's just me. That's my story. And then finally, when I got into high school, I got to the point where I had a cyst on my vocal cords, and which developed into multiple other things, but at the time was the cyst, and I would lose my voice for periods of time. I literally couldn't talk. I'd have to whisper. I'd be writing stuff down, and it was embarrassing and very vulnerable as a teenager to like feel like that. Like, I can't even speak up. I can't talk. And I remember being like, this cannot be my life. Like, life kind of takes you to that point where, you know, it takes you almost to your knees, or it takes you to a point of you're like, this can't be it. Like, this can't be it. Now I'm supposed to go my whole life where I can barely talk for days on end, and I'm sick all the time, and this and that. I'm like, this is insane. finally, that's when I was stopped listening to those doctors and to those older systems that were telling me that this was it. This is all we can do. This is just your life. And wanted to do surgeries, but the outcomes were awful. So finally, I started asking more questions. I started using Google, which is a free search toolbar in YouTube that you can Google anything, which sometimes is good. Sometimes you'll find scary things, but you actually find a lot of information. You'll find out how other people think, how other people decide to live, how other people choose things differently. And that's how I found spirituality. That's how I found there's different ways of eating. That's how I found that, oh, maybe my throat issues are actually having to do with something called a throat chakra, which then leads into the fact how much I've been suppressing my emotions, and how my background led me to believe that I needed to be someone that I wasn't. And I wasn't speaking up for myself. I was swallowing so much anger, so much suppressed emotions that it was causing acid reflux, actual fire burning in my stomach from emotions I'm suppressing, coming up my throat, burning my vocal cords, and was creating a cyst because I was locking all my emotions and my creative energy in there, trying to fit people's images. Like, when I look back, because now I know differently, I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I doing? Like, that's so sad, my poor inner child. But that's just one way that I started questioning an outer system outside of me. Then that starts leading to, meeting veterans, how this system with Veterans Affairs hasn't really supported them, but we're all led to believe from the TV that they are. Or other systems of going into the school system, here's the things you need to learn, and then you're going to be successful. But then you get out in the world and you realize, well, a lot of the stuff I learned isn't really helping me that much. So maybe we need to change the system. And I've actually been talking to some teachers where I teach yoga, and they all say the same thing. The system needs to change. It is not supporting students. And I'd like to also add that it's not supporting reality. It's not supporting where we are right now at this time. And there's so many different ways that we can start questioning those systems. So the whole program starts to allow you to feel confident in your own mind, your own heart, your own thoughts, your own voice, your own choices. And that part makes me get emotional again, because we haven't been told that we can trust ourselves. And it's so sad in my heart, because we can trust ourselves. We have this self, we have this heart, we have intuition that tells us, like, I don't like that, or I do like this, or maybe I should try this, or I shouldn't do that. So going into 2020, or just starting even today, like really starting to strengthen relying on yourself. And it's not a scary thing of being like, I don't like responsibility, but it's being that leader for you, because then once you feel awakened and you feel like you can be vulnerable and express yourself, you'll naturally just start talking that way. And then your friends like, oh, really? That kind of makes me think differently. Or, oh, this thing happened to me. And it's like a snowball effect. Like little light bulbs all across the grid of the world will start lighting up. So just honing into your power is the greatest thing that you could possibly do for yourself. It's so freeing. I struggle with it all the time, hence why I put myself in situations so I can learn more things, so then I can teach more things, because to teach is to learn, and I'm always learning. But I do know for sure that the more I find my inner power, the more things start clicking into place. The less resentment I feel, the less anger I feel, the better just everything is. And then when you start going from there, you can start to heal your mind, you can start to heal physical symptoms, your relationships start getting better. And even if they change, there's been multiple people in my life that have come and gone, but every time the people that keep coming are people that I'm like, yes, like we're gonna be friends forever. Or people that I'm like, oh, let's work together, or oh, I can help you with that and you can help me with this. And some of the other relationships that have kind of melted away are ones that, you know, were built on something different. They weren't me being my authentic self, and that person probably wasn't being their authentic self. Or we were there to teach each other a lesson, like what's an empath and what's a narcissist. So there's always, you know, those reasons, but the more you can hone into self, the more everything around you starts shifting. And I love using the word transform, because Wayne Dyer, he explains it the best. It's like going beyond your form. So it's going beyond just the physical aspect of what's happening. It's going beyond and connecting to the energy and to your inner voice and spirituality. And then that which is to go through form, that changes the form of something. And I really noticed that in my life physically, of any illness. If I can go in and change the energy somehow, then the form has to change. It's like the law of the world is that it has to change. Even my relationships, anytime something's come up, if I can go in and see what's actually going on, or go to the therapy, or go find that extra help, if I can find out what's really going on, I can change the energy. I can change the belief systems behind that, and then it has to change. The outer form has to change. So you have so much power for your own life, and I just hope you feel inspired in some way, that it leads you to the next step, or whatever it is that you know you need to do that's best for you, and to continue doing that. And yes, as I mentioned, I have this 31-day program. I've made it just $19.99 for the entire 31 days because I want it to be accessible for everyone. Not everyone can spend like $200 on a program that can change their life. This is something that's like, you will feel change. You are going to go through like a lot emotionally, but also feel really good in so many different ways. And then you can use that as a stepping stone for something else. Maybe after that, you're like, oh, I'd like more yoga in my life, or, oh, I'd like to try this, I'd like to try that. So it's a stepping stone, but also something that is like a full program that you can start implementing right away. So if any questions, let me know. I also do one-on-one coaching. So if you ever just want to chat, it's kind of like I'm your best friend and we get to chat, but then I also know things and you know things. So it just ends up being like a great conversation instead of a scary, intense one when you're going to meet with someone you don't know to start pouring your heart out with them. So I'm here for you if I can help you in any way. Connect with me, and thank you so much. And you all are inspiring me by always just showing up and coming on, or any of your comments, or people I see sending me pictures saying like, I started juicing, and they're like from Lunenburg, like where I'm from, and like we have no idea what juicing is. Like we eat meat and potatoes, and like salad is lettuce and onions and tomatoes. Like we don't know these things. So these are all things I've learned, and I love seeing other people that have learned that, you know, you really took that step, but you were vulnerable, being like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do next. Hi Dave, I miss you. Fabian misses you too, and we can't wait to see you again sometime. Hi Caitlin, I love you, and I love looking at your pictures. Barb, you are awesome, and I can't wait to work with you again soon. And Trish, thank you so much for the support all the time, and you and your husband are such great leaders too. And everyone else on here that was watching, Denise, Derek, Susan, Chad, Alicia, I'm like naming up everyone's name, Taryn, Lindsay, Courtney, Vanessa, JC, and Cindy, everyone, hello. And anyone who watches this later on, feel free to say hi and reach out. Thanks guys, have a great day. Bye-bye.